Thanks for joining us today for Be Seen on Air. I am Sherii Sherban, your host, and we're going to talk about history today. Starting off with me, I have Michael Delaware. He is engaged in a whole lot of history going on in our community and around. So, Michael, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Sherii.
Fantastic. So, you know, I can't help myself, but so I have to start out by saying, tell me about the hat.
Well, we put together a Christmas program at the Battle Creek Regional History Museum called Tales of Christmas Past. And at some point we started saying, well, what are we going to wear as a costume? And we decided top hats. Dave Eddy was in the show, and so I went ahead and found it online and bought a top hat. And I began wearing it around when I was selling tickets, and I found it drew people over to ask me questions about why I was wearing a hat. You know?
Right.
So, and I, you know, one of the things I noticed about it, wasn't expected, was that people seem to smile more when they see somebody wearing a hat like this. For some reason this time of year. So it was fun to engage people with it, and I also I would sell tickets with my dog and dress her up as Santa Claus. So she was part of the show. So people saw me around town with Santa Dog, and she was in the parade as Santa Dog in our big train. So.
Which was a lot of fun, I have to say, as I was watching all of that go by during the parade this year. The only thing that would have made it better was some snow. Snow.
Yeah,
I have some
a little
great
less
pictures.
ice cold, a little more snow floaty. Yeah, it would have been nice.
Right? That would have been so fabulous. So, Michael, let's talk a little bit about kind of the local history. You mentioned the program this last weekend. You've been very much engaged in the Battle Creek History Museum. So tell us about what it is and why here was a great idea.
Well, you know, Battle Creek's history is very special. I mean, the more you look into it, it has so many different layers. It began with the pioneer period, and then you had the industrial period, and then you had the pre-Civil War period where you got the Underground Railroad, and it always seemed to position itself because it was a major traveling part of the state between Detroit and Chicago. It always seemed to position itself for the right industry or the right incident or right thing at the right time. So we had the Underground Railroad, we had the cereal industry, but we also had big industrial industry with the Advanced Thresher and Nichols and Shepard producing those, and the Oliver Corporation producing combines, and so they had this post-Civil War industrial period with the Reconstruction. You had pre-Civil War with the Underground Railroad. Years go by, there's always these interesting businesses and industries and stories that are related to Battle Creek, and there's a lot of interesting people that lived here as a result,
Right.
I mean, you could look at the old theater history, because we were on the route between Detroit and Chicago. When the railroads came in 1870, that opened up it was the golden age of circuses in 1870. There was enough railroads around the state at that point that entertainment was traveling by railroad. So you had circuses, you had traveling, Broadway shows and all sorts of things coming through Battle Creek. So there's just so many fascinating layers of history that it's fun to study history here in Battle Creek. And what we're trying to do at the museum is get people interested in learning about it, because history is cool if you really look into it. And I came across a really interesting article. I was trying to find a way to convey why you study history to people. And there's this great article that was written in 1998 by a man named Peter Stearns. And he said, the name of the article is called Why Study History, but he describes the best description I've heard of why you should study history in that article, and it says he describes it as the laboratory of the human experience.
Okay.
So you really look at it, and he went further to say that it offers the basic data about the forces that affect our lives, and we emerge from a study of history with an enhanced capacity for informed citizenship, critical thinking, and simple awareness. From studying that laboratory of history. And that really makes sense to me, the way it really hit home to me when I saw that article. And that kind of conveys what my interest is. I want people to find that history is fun. There's a lot of interesting things to learn about it. And it's an important part of study, and it's kind of fallen away in the curriculum of school systems. It's morphed into social studies and other types of things, but fewer classes on history of like why we study history and what is important about it. And that's kind of the role of the History Museum.
Okay.
You know, and we built a history education center as part of the museum, and I did a major fundraising campaign for that this year. And we're still working on it. We have a big sound system coming into that room, and there's going to be big pictures of portraits of local history on that wall. It's going to be a room like none other in the city of Battle Creek. And we started our first major show in that room on Christmas this weekend with the Tales of Christmas Past. And it was just a wonderful weekend experience. I mean, we did 2 performances, sold out audiences.
Great.
And everybody walked out of there, we're just having fun. We had Big B Coffee as a sponsor, so they brought in coffee and cocoa. We had Honor Credit Union helping us out with ticket sales, and they provided goodie bags that we could give to the audience members. So we played that up, we worked that into the performance.
Nice.
We did this, Dave Eddy and I did this naughty and nice bit at the show where we stood up in the audience and we said, well, you know, Dave, I think there's some nice people in the audience. He says, no, I think there's more naughty. And we played that up, and then we had the rest of the cast go into the audience and interact with them and give out little goodie bags to the naughty and the nice. And there were special bags for each one. But
yeah.
It was fun. It's a fun way to interact with people and get people to have a little fun with history.
Right.
But all the pieces that we did at the show were all Victorian era stories and poems that most of them were published in Battle Creek newspapers from that time period.
Wow.
We selected a few pieces from around the country. We had Yes, Virginia, There Really Is a Santa Claus, that published in New York originally, but that made its way all over the country, you know.
Sure.
And we had a letter from Mark Twain to his daughter about from your Santa Claus, your loving Santa Claus, and that was read by Donna Rickman, who's from Hannibal, Missouri. So that was very special, you know, because she's originally from Mark Twain's hometown. So she wanted to do that piece, and it was just fun, you know.
Yeah.
It was a fun evening of stuff. And of course, we had, it's the 200th Christmas of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. Did you know that? 200th year. It was written in 1822. So this Christmas Eve in 2022 is the 200th anniversary of that famous 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. So we played that up, and we had some great sound effects going along with that, you know. So.
You know, I love this story, right? And so I also love Shutterfly if you haven't ever experienced them. And so they allow you to take stories and then interject your own characters into the story. So I had to take that story because that was one of them, right?
Okay.
And interject all the grandbabies and, you know, our house. And it was like, that is just so stinking fun, right? So fun to be able to do that. So as far as the performance is concerned, and the new room that you have coming along here, does it have a stage in it?
Yeah, we bought a stage for the performance, and now the stage is in there, and it's a portable stage, so we can make it larger or smaller, or move it and put it away if we don't need a stage for a particular performance. And it's also a type of system that if we needed to make it larger than what we had, we could buy additional pieces and add it on to it, you know.
Okay.
So it was done by a company called Stage Right. Very nice stage system. Yeah, very nice stage system. Yeah.
So with the stage now that you have in the History Educational Center, right? Historic Educational Center. Are you intending to use that room then as you do your regular, let's say, monthly presentations, or are you going to?
Yeah, this year was an exciting year of experimenting with a lot of different speakers and presenters. You know, we reached out and we tried new things, and some of them, you know, drew a bigger audience than others, but they all drew audiences. And yeah, this History Education Center is going to be involved with that. I mean, it's going to be a big part of it. But the sound system, we're going to have an AV system, so if a presenter wants to plug in a laptop and have a PowerPoint show up on the big screen, or a video or pictures show, it's all there. You know, it's all the tools are there. And yeah, we're going to have a lot of different all kinds of different stuff coming up on the calendar this year, as well as performances like we did at the Christmas program, they're going to be on different topics. I've got one that I'm working on with Donna Rickman right now that we're hoping to feature amazing women of Calhoun County. It's kind of the working title right now.
I see.
We're not sure when that's going to fall on the calendar yet, but there's some great stories of women that did extraordinary things here in Calhoun County.
Yeah.
And so we're going to it's going to be hard to pick, but we're going to pick probably maybe 8 or 10 stories and recruit some women to play the roles and do the readings of those, telling about their life and make that part of the plan this year. So
right.
Yeah,
it might be fun if you can find some of their descendants.
Yeah, that would be quite a challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just there's so much in history that lends itself towards doing fun and amazing things, right?
Yeah.
So one of the questions I always have about history, I thoroughly enjoy history. I think it is the bomb diggity, and maybe it's the way that my parents have presented it as I was aging, and my grandparents, and never looked at it as old stuffy boring things that you did when the photo album came out of the closet, right? But rather it was really very much alive in our household. So how do we help schools to bring history back to life, to really spend more time featuring some of the amazing individuals and things that have happened in our history? And so how do we do that?
Well, we make it fun. It's got to be fun. Entertainment, has to be fun. It's got to be fun, entertainment, educational. Like when we did our program on Christmas, we did a little bit of history intro on some of the segments, and then we made it fun. Like we had there was a story that was written and published in 1885, but it was about the 1500s of Queen Elizabeth I in her girlhood. And they used to have a Lord of Misrule in the court. Yeah, they would appoint a guy. It was very much like a court jester, and he was appointed for the 12 days of Christmas, and he was in charge of Christmas revelries.
Oh.
So we took that story, and it was a very, very wordy type story to present. It was a very difficult piece to try to explain to the audience. So we did a narration introducing it with Dave Eddy, and then I read the story, and then we had Brian McCombs play the outlandish Lord of Misrule with the audience. And so in that way we made it fun, they were laughing, and they understood the story. And then they walked away with a little piece of history from the 1500s, which was quite amazing. And that's what we want to try to do with the stories. Like there's a great story of downtown Battle Creek. It's just a little snippet in a window of history of Battle Creek, where we had the mill race downtown. There was a bridge over the mill race, and a circus came to town. And the largest elephant that ever toured North America was in that circus. And when he crossed the bridge in the mill race, his name was Hannibal. He fell through it because he weighed 15,000 pounds, and the wood bridge was not built for it. So he fell into the water, and it was a spectacle, and the kids were on the side of the street with the circus and screaming and yelling, and the women were screaming, "Oh my God!" And old Hannibal, because he was used to they had trained him to pick up circus tent posts as part of setting up the circus, and they would hammer. So he worked his way. He solved this problem, but for a brief moment, it was he was bellowing and he was in the water, and it was a surprise because he fell through, and it's just a little bit of entertainment, and that could be a fun story to tell.
Sure.
For and of course then you can tie in the whole history and the whole history of the mill race and make it educational, how these two things met, the circus and the mill race at the same time. And it's entertaining, so I've told that story a lot. I even have a video about that on my YouTube channel. And it's just, those are just the little stories that you pick out to tell, that you can make history fun for people.
Yeah.
And entertaining. And then you can also do these other things,
So hopefully nobody was riding on him at the time, right?
No, he was just walking, literally walking. But what's funny is they brought him back into town at a later date, and he refused to cross that bridge.
I can't
They
say
had to take him
him
around. They had to take him on another route. So the elephants never forget.
Yeah, so they say, right?
That's right.
Oh my goodness. So, you mentioned your YouTube channel, right? So tell us a little bit about what one might find on your YouTube channel.
Well, I started, I had the YouTube channel originally established in 2010, and I was originally, because I'm a realtor, I was originally doing real estate videos, and it wasn't really inspiring to me, and I didn't do much with it for almost a decade. And then 2020 happened. I started looking at what was I really enjoying about making videos, and I thought I would relaunch it. I decided to take a bunch of classes on Skillshare to get caught up with the current technology with video making. And one of the classes I took, I said, well, just start doing YouTube videos, and then you'll find what direction you really want to build an audience with. And so I started doing walking tours around Battle Creek and hikes and trails, because I was into hiking with my dogs, and I figured I'll do that and just show people that there's really interesting things around Battle Creek. Because when I searched on YouTube at that time, there was a lot of negative things, and I didn't really like that. It's like, this is not my town, and because those are the only content creators, they're doing horrible stuff. So I thought, well, I'm going to fill YouTube with stories about places to go in Battle Creek. So if somebody, taking it from the viewpoint of somebody who were moving here and wanted to learn about the community, they might say, oh, well, I didn't know about that. And I did get a little bit of that reaction, people saying, well, I never knew about that trail or that, and they were really appreciative. But it wasn't until I found, I did a video on the historic markers downtown that I felt like there was a sudden change in the response pattern of the audience. And suddenly I didn't get as many more views, but I got more feedback. People really loved it. And I really loved history. I grew up reading history books, and my mom was a librarian and all kinds of stuff. So I was always surrounded by history. And I always had a fascinating with it. And the books that I tend to lean toward when I'm reading for my own entertainment is history books, because I want to learn something while I'm reading. So I thought, well, I don't really know Battle Creek's history. I've lived here 20 years. I don't know it that well. I mean, I know some of the basic stories. Why don't I start putting some videos together about history? And and it became a learning experience for me, and it was just fun. Started out with cemetery. I went to Oak Hill Cemetery at one point and filmed my first cemetery video, and I just started with the most well-known graves there. And it got a tremendous amount of response. And I thought, well, what if I started filming some of the stories of the people they don't know about? I bet there's some interesting stories. And I started digging into it. And of course, Jim Jackson's book was a great guide.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's our cameraman here today, guys. But anyways, his book was a great guide. It was a good starting point. Bernice Bryant Lowe's book was a great starting point for me on local stories. And then I branched out and did my own, learned how to research and find difficult to find stories of people. And so I started going to cemeteries, just filming interesting headstones. And I'd come back and I'd research to find who they were. And half of the time you could never find anything on them, or you get just a small obituary, but once in a while you'd find this amazing story that I know no one ever heard of before. And I would be able to put it into a story, and then I try to find some other material on them, and it just grew from there. So a lot of my videos that they'll find on there are me going through cemeteries telling stories. I've done a few on local historic buildings around town, other history. I've done a few videos on Christmas, and I'll probably put another one together between now and Christmas Eve or something, I don't know. But I did one on Christmas stories, which is kind of how I evolved this Christmas program at the museum. I took some of that material and said, this is a starting point. This would be fun to do in a live performance. And then we researched and found more. And then I did one in the history of New Year's in Battle Creek, because I thought, what did they do at New Year's way back then? Recently this year, I did one on the history of Halloween. Like, what was Halloween like in the Victorian period here in Battle Creek? And a lot of people think it's about pumpkins and stuff. It was about cabbages, Sherii. They threw cabbages everywhere. The kids, I guess cabbages were a big crop right around Halloween, and it became a tradition. The kids would go, and if you didn't harvest your cabbages before Halloween, they were wounding up on somebody's porch, is the story I found. I was totally amazed that cabbages, all the articles were like, take in your cabbages tonight, were warnings, putting it in the paper, put away your, it was a night for mayhem, you know, so they would go around town and they'd switch the signs on buildings. You know, a lot to do with the horse stands and all kinds of things that were germane to that period that we don't even think about today, you know.
Right.
You know, wagons, they come, the boys would, it was mostly boys doing all this stuff. We were the bad boys back then. But girls got into it too. They would put on boys' clothes.
Oh, there we go.
So
That's
they
how
would
it
hide in among the boys because they wanted to be part of it too. And those were all wonderful stories that came out when I did this. And they would do, you know, people would get up the next morning and they'd find a wagon perched on top of this outhouse and all kinds of crazy stuff. You know, outhouses got destroyed. And
Oh, no. So how often do you try to produce a new video?
Well, I've been very involved with projects at the museum the last several months, but normally I try to produce at least one a week.
Okay.
But lately it's probably been more like every 2 weeks, you know. And I try to film things that are happening at the museum that I think would be interesting. But I haven't, since I've been working on this Christmas program for almost 2 months, I haven't really had much time to do as much as I wanted to on the channel. But I do a regular podcast that I consistently do, and that's 3 times a week. It comes out, an episode comes out on Tuesday, one comes out on Friday, and then on Sundays, I usually have a guest interview on the podcast, and we talk about local history, and that's called Tales of Southwest Michigan's Past. So I cast a wider net of local history of Southwest Michigan.
Sure.
And I call Southwest Michigan that area where the original lower counties were, from Jackson all the way over to Berrien, were all organized around the same time. There's about 14 of them that were all organized at the same time when the surveys were done, and then the lands was made available. So that whole period from that, there's all different stories. So I have interviewed history museums. I've interviewed authors that have written books on different stories. I've had interviewees or guests from as far away as Grand Rapids and Muskegon. So I don't have to drive over there. I just call them and I set up an online interview with them, and we do it with a software that I use. And so I think it's brought a lot of history, local, regional history to people. And I get, the audience is building on it. You know, It's not as big as my YouTube audience, but the interesting thing about the podcast audience is they tend to listen to the whole show.
Okay.
Whereas the YouTube audience may watch half a video and then they go on to something else. The podcast audience will listen to an whole hour show because they're driving to and from work in their car and they're listening to it. So.
Wow. So it sounds fascinating to me. What time of day is it on?
It airs at 6 a.m. every day. It comes out, and then you can pull it up on Apple iPods, so you can listen to any of the episodes. They're all out there. There's about 130 plus episodes out there right now.
Oh my goodness.
So you can start anywhere. So if you want to venture into that, you can pick it up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any of the podcast apps that you download.
Okay.
Most of my audience comes from Apple or Spotify based on the stats, but there's a few other ones out there like I can't remember some of them off now, but there's a few off ones like, you know.
So Mary Butler used to join me on the show quite a bit, and I'd love to have Mary on here, and she would often tell me during the holiday time frame of the first Christmas tree in Battle Creek. Have you done one on that yet?
I have not.
It's a fascinating story, and I'm not going to give it all away, but I invite you to look into that one.
I will look into it.
Just consider it. I think you'll find it really kind of cool. And
Good.
Another impact that Battle Creek has had on the world at large.
Wow.
Right. So we have just a couple of minutes left today.
Okay.
So what didn't I ask you today that you'd really like to make sure that all of our viewers get a chance to hear about? History
is fun. History is something that you really should make part of your life to learn about the area that you live in. And it brings a sense of pride in the community. And I think it's good for tourism, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. I think it's good in the sense of, like, because I'm a realtor, I look at things that people want to live here, and they want to be here, they want to have things in the community. If you have a sense of growing pride, people want to be there, you know. So, and you put these things in the community, and that's what we're trying to put at the Battle Creek Regional History Museum, is a sense of something that you can be proud of, and you can take your friends and guests that come into town And it also becomes an inspiration for people to live here, and that people newly arriving will be inspired to rally around it and circle the wagons and make everything a great success.
So if somebody wants to learn more about their Regional History Museum, where do they go?
There's a website, bcrhm.org.
Okay.
Battle Creek Regional History Museum.org, and we post our calendar on there. They can sign up for our newsletter on that website, and that's usually the best way because we do a monthly newsletter. It tells you what's happening at the museum that month. We also throw in some local history stories in that newsletter, and so you can subscribe to that. That's totally free. You can become a member for $35 a year and get more benefits with discounts at the gift store, as well as just being invited to a lot of special events at the museum. And we're growing that as we, and it helps to support the museum to do what we're doing. And then if they want to find my podcast, it's Tales of Southwest Michigan's Past. My YouTube channel is under my name, Michael Delaware. You can just search on YouTube and you will find it.
Fantastic. And what are the hours of the museum?
Right now we're open on weekends, and it is 10 a.m. to 5 on Saturdays and noon to 5 on Sundays. Those hours will eventually change as we get more volunteers and as the History Center gets rolling. We're open for special events during the week, so we do Night at the Museum as one of the events. So anything that's on the calendar for those special events, we're open, obviously. So usually once a month we do a Night at the Museum.
All right, and then you're located on Jackson.
Yep.
The parking's adjacent.
Yep, 307 West Jackson Street, right, not far from the Math and Science Center, and there's parking on site. So.
All right, so one last question as we wrap it up. So for those that don't know, tell us what used to be in the building that you now call home.
It was the Battle Creek Equipment Company, and from what I understand, the history of it, they used to manufacture a lot of the equipment that was used at the sanitarium.
Yeah.
And a lot of the old things that you put your back on and rubbing and all kinds of funny stuff, all those things, those funny things you see in the picture.
Right.
A lot of it was manufactured right in that building. We even have some artifacts from that we'll be putting in the larger exhibits down the road to show people that. So. Right.
I would have thought you might have found something fun in the building as you're starting to renovate it.
Yep. We have some old pictures and things of the old times, and we have a lot of the old artifacts, all of the old machines that were left to us. So.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Michael, I want to thank you for joining me today. I do hope that you'll come back and join me again.
I will.
To learn more about the Battle Creek Regional History Museum, again, visit bcrhm.org. You also have a Facebook page, so they can look at some things on Facebook. And your youtube.com
is
Michael Delaware.
YouTube is Michael Delaware, yeah.
All right, and then Tales of Southwest Michigan's Past.
And there's a Facebook group called Battle Creek Regional History Museum, and we have about 7,000 people that are part of that group. They certainly should join that. All kinds of interesting things are posted there daily.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And above all else, join.
Yep.
Right?
Become a member.
$35
Come to the museum.
a year. It's not
Support
a bad
us.
deal.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right. Again, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
All right. And I invite you to stay tuned because coming up next, we're going to talk about a little bit more history in our nearby community in Athens, just south of us. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.